Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I am John Wesley Chatham, and this is my good friend Timothy Franck. We're coming at you live.
We're not live.
No, it's not. It's not live. Coming at you live from.
It's not live.
From Seattle, Washington. Wait, you're not in. I'm not in Seattle. You in Seattle?
No, I was in Seattle yesterday.
Oh, how'd that go?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, our little company that Daniel and Noreen and Breck and I have started had a meeting up there, so it was cool to see the four of them. Oh, big news though, the biggest of news. Guess who else came out?
Breck's pregnant.
Yes, Breck is pregnant, and I am the father.
I knew it. Good for you.
Somebody else came out to this meeting with us, and I'm not going to say who the meeting was with or any of that kind of stuff, but Breck's father, the mighty Michael Eisner, was at this meeting.
Wow.
I was very impressed by that. Yeah, like maybe one of the most powerful producers in the history of Hollywood. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he made Raiders of the Lost Ark.
But yeah, it was interesting to meet him. Yeah.
I went to the Hollywood Bowl with Breck, and it was the John Williams concert.
Yeah.
And he went through like all the great movie themes, whatever. But his father was there, and it's pretty like surreal, you know, to think about, wow, man, this guy, you know, he's responsible for so many things that we love, so many classic, iconic things. It's
I mean,
cool.
he ran Paramount at sort of the height of Paramount's movie legacy, right? Raiders, stuff like that. And then he ran Disney when Disney did its big turnaround and became the Disney that exists today. People forget that Disney was kind of in a slump, and he took it over and turned it into modern Disney, which is like this gigantic powerhouse now. Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at the idea of the power producer, the producer who like runs Hollywood, kind of that idea, that is him. That's Michael Eisner. And it used to be him and Harvey Weinstein, but then it turned out Harvey Weinstein is a dirtbag. So now it's just Michael Eisner.
And he's sharp as a tack too. He's still,
80 and he's still got it. Yeah, he's still all there for sure.
Has Noreen moved up north yet?
He bought a place in Vancouver. They have not moved, but they own a place up there. I told him I'm just going to move up there, start living in his house.
I figured you guys might have chose Seattle because he was up there too. It's like a middle meeting.
No, we were meeting somebody there.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to talk some more about the mighty John Carpenter and two of his, I think, stranger films. I think so. We've done like the powerhouse early John Carpenter with Halloween and Assault on Precinct 13, like raw, early, shooting from the hip, doesn't have enough money to make anything, but he's fucking doing it anyway. No studio interference. We've done that era. Now we're moving into now he's got a little money. Now studios are back in his play, but now he has to work inside the studio system. And that's a positive and a negative. And I think these two movies are really interesting. So we got Christine, which was, I think, his first sort of major studio horror film.
No, The Thing was a studio.
Was The Thing? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I think the reason I was thinking that is because The Thing is not as polished as Christine is. Christine is very polished.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then I always forget the name of the other movie. What?
Starman. God.
Cut that out, Joseph. And then
you're also name blind too. Not only are you face blind,
I'm everything. I'm everything blind. And then Starman, which is a super weird movie because it's kind of a sci-fi movie. I mean, it is a sci-fi movie, it has aliens and shit, but it's mostly a romance, like a weird romance film. It's a very strange movie. Not at all what I would expect from John Carpenter. But I mean, that's a good thing. He's testing his wings, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Starman and we've talked about this before, and I know that some people, you know, this is not a popular take, but Starman for me with Carpenter is in his top 5.
Really?
It could be in his top 3.
Really?
I'm a huge fan of this movie, and what I love about it is it demonstrates just how skilled John Carpenter is as a storyteller. And when he started out as a filmmaker, he didn't start out to be a horror filmmaker or a genre filmmaker. He wanted to be Howard Hawks. He wanted to be able to expand and have the range to tell all kinds of different stories. And that was the director he most admired and most looked up to. And he kind of, with the success of Halloween and Assault on Precinct 13, and he kind of got caught in this place which he loves, and he loves those films. So he was making those movies. And this was an opportunity given to him by Michael Douglas, who was a producer, which is crazy at the time, who produced this film. And he was like, this is my chance to tell a love story. It's a love story. It's a road movie, but it's also a science fiction movie. And I think he nails it. And, we can kind of save that. We can start with Christine, because I think Christine's one of his misses. And a lot of the things that goes right in Starman are the things that I think let's start with Starman then. In Christine. Let's start with Christine. Right. Let's start with the miss, because a lot of the things that I think went wrong in Christine go right in Starman. So we could talk about how they went wrong in Christine. And plus, we won't spend as much time on Christine. Were you a fan? Did you read the book?
I had read the book, but I didn't read the book until after I'd seen the movie. I didn't love the movie. And at that time, I think I'd read a couple of Stephen King things, but I hadn't become the huge Stephen King fan that I became later. After I saw the movie, I was like, I gotta read this book and see how close the movie is to the book. And I mean, it's not like a hyper faithful adaptation, but it's the spirit of the book is definitely in the film. I mean, it's not a complete departure. But I also think it was a period where Stephen King was writing some pretty strange books.
Was it the cocaine period?
I didn't want to be mean and call it the cocaine period, but it probably falls in the cocaine period. Yeah. And he's a good enough writer that he can take an off the wall, half baked idea and make it interesting and make it readable, because he's so good with characterization. So when you read the book, you fall in love with this kid. You understand his love affair with the car. You understand how owning that car makes him feel and why it becomes so central to his life. And if you've ever been a teenager with a car, you remember what that feels like. That first car that you got, that car that suddenly you had freedom. And especially if it's a cool car, like the very first car I ever owned, I only owned it for about a year and a half, but the first car I ever owned was a 67 Mustang. And it was a cool car, right? So being a high school kid and the first car you own is a cool car.
How'd you get a hold of that?
So my father was a strange man. And one of the things that he would do is he would just randomly buy stuff. Like, he had good jobs at the time, so he could afford. Like, he would just come home with like a shitty motorhome and be like, "Hey, we own a motorhome now. We're all going to go camping in our motorhome." And we never would. Like, we would go camping one time. Everybody would hate it. And then later he would just sell the motorhome. So I don't know why this happened, but.
And you were like, I hate all you people. Why do I
want to live in this little motorhome with you people? He came home. I was just starting to learn how to drive. He comes home with this 67 Mustang, and it was clean. It was in mint condition.
Are you serious?
It was a mint condition 67 Mustang.
Wow. What year was this?
This was in 85.
Hell yeah, Dad.
Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, I got you a car," and I was like, "What?" Yeah, and like, I didn't even have a license yet. Like, I was still just learning how to drive. I didn't even have a license.
Was it like that Dumb and Dumber moment? Like, all that shit you put me through my whole life and you totally redeemed yourself.
It was a little bit like that, yeah. But because of that, when I later read Christine, like, the way that owning a cool car changed his life and changed the way he saw himself, King nails that in that book. The characterization of that, he nails it, and that makes the book very readable, because it's so relatable if you've ever been a young person getting your first car and the way it changes your life.
Yeah, to me, that's what I think is a really interesting idea, and also an idea that could be very fertile ground for a story. Every human being has something in the center of their soul where they just don't feel like they're enough. Yeah. They don't feel. And it's heightened within your teenage years. That's when you feel the most awkward. That's when you feel the most ostracized. And there are some kids that discover cars within that time, if they can get their hands on a car. And all of a sudden, they have something that makes them feel good about themselves. They have something that gives them self-esteem, that gives them an identity.
Well, and it represents independence.
So on top of that, on top of like the deeper layers of like, and he even, he even says like, I have something that I can repair and make better. Yeah. Like but I can't, like something that I can't do with myself, but I can do it with my car. And at the time, the layers are, you if there's somebody that feels awkward and then they get a hold of an automobile and that thing it gives them a sense of status, that gives them a sense of identity, that gives them a self-esteem. But on top of that, they have freedom. And at that time, like you were in the threshold of adulthood, and there was like some people, it's like you're standing on a cliff and there's childhood on the other side of the cliff and then there's adulthood and you're standing there and some of your friends are jumping before you and you're like, God damn it, what's it like down there? I want to jump on the fucking side of the cliff. And some of them like will take you on a trip with them and you can experience the freedom, but you got to go back to the top of the cliff because you don't have your car yet. And so, so there's so many layers that people become. And I think my generation, I don't know if kids are as crazy about cars anymore. Like, I think my generation is like the last of the car culture where you would spend hours in your buddy's garage and they're working on their cars and everybody just hang out around it. And because cars are so complicated now. So I think that is a really interesting thing to explore, this love affair and this obsession with their car, because we've known people like that. Unfortunately, I didn't have a 67 Mustang. I had an 84 Berlinetta Camaro. It was brown, but I tell people it was gold. and this thing was it was like it went through all the things Christine went through it, but it couldn't repair itself.
Well, and we all knew that kid. I mean, or that group of kids. The school that I went to was way overcrowded. It was a big school. It had a lot of kids in it, but it was like an overcrowded school. So everything that could be turned into a classroom got turned into a classroom. And I actually wound up taking one of my math classes in the classroom that was supposed to be for the auto shop. And so like there was kind of a classroom area, but then like right next to us with the big open doors and people's like disassembled cars were like right over next to us. And there were kids in there all the time working on those cars. And there were the auto shop kids, right? That like they would buy some old beater, they would roll it into auto shop their freshman year, and that car would be in that fucking auto shop for 4 years. They took auto shop every year and just worked on that car. Yeah. And then by the time they rolled out as, like a senior or whatever, it was like completely mint and had been repainted and the engine had been fixed up and stuff. We all knew those guys. I was never one of those guys, but I had friends who were like, my friend Ray, he would buy really shitty cars and then try to like make them cool. He would buy like a Datsun 510 and then try to make it cool by like jacking up their back, jacking up the back or putting stuff on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In my time, it was like people would buy like CRXs and things like that, and then soup them up. Like they would spend so much money with 4 cylinders to get them as fast as they could possibly get. And it's like, just get a fucking V8, dude. Like the amount of money that you're putting in this car. I had a friend, Joe Mancini, that had a car lift in his garage.
Oh, wow.
And so everybody would go over there. And
was his dad a mechanic?
His dad is an airplane mechanic. His dad had this, it was called Air Mech. And it was at Lawrenceville Airport. And so we would go over to my buddy Joe Mancini's house. And I remember Stuart Smith had an older Mustang 5.0. And Joe had a Corvette. Like everybody had their cars and they would jack it up. They would all work and we would hang out while they worked on the cars. Yeah. I never had the fucking money to like, so I got to like live like through their experiences. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was a cool thing, but it was never like, maybe if I had the money to like get something and do something at the time, I would have been more into it. But it was a fun hang to do that. Anyway, what I missed about Christine, and the thing is, with any film that you do or any story you tell, you have to care about the people involved. And one of the things that Christine, I think you got this beautiful story that I was ready to connect and relate to, but the kid's journey, I think his name's Arnie, the kid's journey, I didn't get to know him enough and I didn't care about him. And it's really, I wasn't emotionally attached to his descent into madness.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was, and I think it's writing, but I also think it's performance. I didn't see this longing in him, this need for something in the car, give that to him, and then see him be transformed by the car. It was kind of non-specific. Like you see him in the beginning, it's like the Clark Kent thing. He has glasses, and I guess that makes him a nerd.
Yeah.
And then you see him, like his transformation. He loses the glasses and has like a new shirt. And it's like, whoa, he's changed, man. And the performance-wise, it was like in the beginning, it was non-specific. Like you couldn't see the person that we're all going to fall in love with and then see him descend into darkness. It was in between the whole time.
Yeah.
So I couldn't connect to his journey. And then Tom Stockwell, was the kind guy, his best friend, and that, but I didn't get a sense of their relationship. I didn't get a sense that, I was like, I couldn't understand what connected them and what, why were they friends when John Stockwell was like this cool football player, and there wasn't like a relationship between them that was properly built.
And this is stuff where the book is better because the book takes more time with the characterization. With the movie, I think, you said it was partly script and partly performance. I think the script is very undercooked in Christine. It feels like an early draft of a script because a lot of things feel sort of penciled in, sort of just sketched in rather than really fleshed out. And I think what the stuff that you're missing is that stuff. It is more characterization, a deeper understanding of the relationship of the main character to the people in his life, how the existence of the car alters all of those relationships. And as you said, the descent into madness. In order for us to sympathize with the ways that his changes ruin the relationships in his life, we have to give a shit about those relationships. And as you point out, you kind of don't, like they just seems like here's some people he knows, and now he has a car, and now he's evil. Where we never really feel that.
And the transition, like when did that happen? So you meet him, you meet his friend, he finds this car, he's obsessed with this car, right? And also, does the book go into the backstory of the car at all? Because
I don't think
film,
so. No, I don't remember.
Yeah, from the film. In the film, it's like the car comes off the assembly line evil, or even on the assembly line. It's like bad to the bone, and she's killing people already. It would be interesting to like if there was a story behind it, like somebody died in that car or something like that. That like Christine was a person who died in the car, and then her spirit is infused in the car or something like that. He sees this car, he's obsessed with this car. He starts fixing it up, and the next thing, John Stockwell's playing football, and he looks over, and he's like leaning on the car, making out with like the hottest girl in the school. With like 3 scenes ago, John Stockwell's like, "We got to get you laid this year, man. We got to get," had the quintessential '80s thing. He's like, "This is the year we're going to get you laid," and all of a sudden, and there's no like, "Wait a minute, what happened? How did you fix the car? When did you start hooking up with this girl, like the hottest girl in the school?" Like, there's none of the.
Well, he took off his glasses and he got a new shirt, so.
Yeah, he took off his glasses and he got his new shirt.
Yeah.
I think in some, when you say it's undercooked, I think with John Carpenter, I think it's kind of, it reminds me of The Fog, and that felt kind of undercooked. The relationships weren't really developed or weren't really clear. And before that fact, I think it's a cool idea and there were some cool scenes in it, but because I wasn't emotionally involved with his descent into madness, with their friendship, and also with his relationship with his girlfriend, and I didn't care about anything, the movie just didn't do anything for me.
I don't disagree with any of that. I think that is the flaw of the movie. It's a bunch of stuff that happens and you don't care about any of the people that is happening to. So it just becomes like watching stuff happen. That's not an uncommon problem with movies. I watch a lot of movies where about halfway in I go, I don't care about any of these people. I'm just watching stuff happen to them. So it's not like, John Carpenter's like failed in some way. That is a thing that happens in a lot of movies, unfortunately. And for me, it always comes back to the story. I think what happens is people get so hung up on the events of a story that they forget the characters that those events are happening to. You always have to be asking yourself, why is this character here? Why do they care about the thing that's happening? In what way are they going to try to alter the thing that's happening? And how is that going to affect them? And if you're not thinking through every scene that way, then it just becomes a travelogue.
And the character motivates the events. And so you see a film like this and events just happen.
Right.
And they don't seem connected into is this the worst possible thing that can happen to this main character? Yeah. And then is the thing that the main character is trying to deal with, is this the thing that the events that happen, are they hitting them right in the strike zone? And this is the thing he has to overcome. But a lot of screenwriting books, they talk about structure. They'll talk about, this needs to happen in the first act, midpoint, second act, third act. But they don't talk about why those things need to happen. They don't need to talk about that all of this has to come from organically from your protagonist. That this is your protagonist's psychology is going to motivate these events, and they're going to hit them in the weakest possible spot that protagonist can be hit because you set it up like that.
It's interesting that you say that, because this came up recently. Daniel and I did a teleconference into a writing class, filmmaking class at a university. That the teacher there asked us to talk to her class. And afterwards, she's like, hey, if you guys ever want to teach a class here, just let me know. I'd love to have you guys teach a class. And Daniel was like, you know what we should do? We should split it up. He's like, I'll teach the class on writing. You teach the class on storytelling. And I thought that was an odd distinction. I was like, I'm not sure what he means. And now what I'm thinking is, so when you teach a class on writing, that's like a mechanic teaching a class on how cars are built, right? And it's very easy to get into the weeds. Like, here's how a transmission works. Here's how, the carburetor works. Here's how here's how the electrical system works. You can really get into the details of how you put it together, but you're never going to hear why the designer made the car look that way, why the designer wanted that version of the front end, why they wanted that styling on the body, right? And I think it's easy when you ask a writer to talk about writing, they turn into mechanics and they start talking about, like, here's how a sentence structure should work, and here's how many paragraphs and that kind of stuff. And I think we don't have enough classes on storytelling where here's why you make a story about this. Here's why you think about characters in every scene. Here's why you have to ask yourself, what is this character doing in the scene? Why are they in the scene? Why do they care about the things that are happening? And what are they trying to do to change what's happening? Because if the character is not actively trying to change what's happening in the scene, then they just feel passive. They feel like they're just a bystander, right? And that kind of approach to storytelling, I think, gets a lot less attention than the sort of mechanic side of storytelling. And I think what happens is then when people start looking at that storytelling side, they go too far, and then it's like, here's how you connect to your muse. Like, then you go into that metaphysical bullshit. I like the middle ground. I like where you talk about stories as an art form before you get to the mechanics of how you put it together. And I go through all that because I'm agreeing with what you're saying, that felt like they mechanically put a movie together, and the engine's in the right spot, and the doors are in the right spot, and the wheels are in this right spot. But nobody sat and said, why are we making this car? What is it supposed to look like? What is the function of this? How is it supposed to make you feel when you look at it? Nobody has that moment.
Yeah. And who is Arnie really, other than a pair of glasses? Who is he before this car? And what does this car do for him?
Yeah.
And how does it seduce him? And how does it intoxicate him? And, then like we care about him. And then when he descends into madness, it moves us. One of the things that I like doing these movies back to back, and I do this often, in my own time, is I'll see a movie like Christine that had all these working parts in it that I feel like I would be attracted to. The story of the kid and the car, and then the car being possessed and everything. I mean, it's an interesting setup for a story, but it just doesn't work for me. It's like I'm mildly interested. There's enough events and enough things there that kind of pull you along. But when you're done, it's like, man, this is there's no meat on the bones. But then I see something like Starman, and I'm going to rave about Starman, and there's probably some people that don't feel the same way.
Before we jump off of Christine, I do want to say that the story that is in there, that's so buried under sort of the gloss of Christine and sort of the surface of it, is a great story, which is taking a powerless person and giving them power, and seeing the ways that a powerless person suddenly being handed power, how it changes them. That is the story of Christine, and they just don't do anything with it.
But and one of the things, there's a little bit of fun taken out of it, because in stories like this, there is the fun moment where there's a powerless person that then gets power, yes, and they have fun with that power. And it's a high point of them really, like him getting the car and him driving on school and everybody being like, what the fuck? And exactly, him rubbing it in everybody's faces, and then him getting the attention of the pretty girl and them seeing them dating. And that was eliminated from the movie.
We skip it. We just skip over that whole chunk.
Right over it.
And that chunk is so important to make us care about the character. It's, if you ever remember Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie, the first one, you need that scene where he's learning how to shoot webs, where he's running across the top of buildings, where he's jumping really far, and that cry of joy that he has.
Yeah.
At the speed and the strength and the freedom of it. And he's shouting with happiness as he's swinging from building to building. You need that moment. You need that moment of like, here's a powerless person. He's suddenly powerful and he feels the joy of that power.
Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Zap with Scott Baio?
Yeah. The one where he like gets like telekinetic powers and he's like using it to pull dresses off girls and stuff.
So that has a great fun and games moment because he discovers this power. It's not a good movie. I'm not promoting the movie.
It's not a good movie.
But this is a good demonstration of him. The guy that like the bully guy he went to the fair and the guy was on one of those spin cars, and he used his powers like spin the guy around till he got sick and, had all kinds of fun with the powers. That it was missing that. When I bring up such a bad example of
I think the classic of that genre, the greatest version of that genre, is the Chevy Chase masterpiece, Modern Problems.
Modern Problems is a phenomenal,
where he gets radiation on him and then he has like psychic powers or telekinetic powers.
He gets toxic waste on him when he's stuck in traffic, and it's crazy.
Anyway, so that I just wanted to mention that, to me, that's the thing about Christine that is missing.
And I did, for whatever reason, I haven't read the book. And so I would imagine, knowing King as well as I do, that the book really went into the psychology of this boy and made you care about him. And then when he got power, really how that made him feel and how he experienced and how he got seduced.
And that is King's greatest strength, is characterization.
Characterization, yeah. And just a little forecast, we're getting into the King series where we do deep Stephen King, go into his books adaptations. We start that next week, I think. Or no, actually tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
We're shooting it tomorrow. I don't know when it's going to come out.
Yeah, I mean, I think what has become clear, I mean, we do this to please ourselves because we think it's fun. So we don't really have a plan or a strategy. But
Ty's always pleasing himself.
I'm always pleasing myself.
Even on camera.
Just below camera, I'm constantly pleasing myself.
Right. Yeah.
But I think the thing that you and I both most want to talk about is stories and storytelling.
Yeah.
And whatever format that is. If it's movies, great. If it's TV shows, great. If it's The Expanse, great. If it's books, great. It is the art of storytelling is what I think the thing that both you and I are most fascinated by.
Now we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, NordVPN. Ty and I have been using NordVPN to protect our devices from malware, stream movies, and TV shows while traveling abroad. And stop getting those annoying pop-up ads. NordVPN can even help you organize all your passwords and provides threat protection by automatically blocking suspicious websites. NordVPN is giving Ty and That Guy listeners a special deal if you sign up using our link. Grab our exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/TATG to get a huge discount off NordVPN plan, plus 4 months for
free.
It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/TATG to get a discount off your plan for 4 months for
free.
That's the best. So to contrast this movie, and I like to do this, like I see Christine has all the things that I think I would be into. For whatever reason, I didn't feel anything. It didn't move me.
Yeah.
But you go to Starman, and within 2 minutes, within 5 minutes of the opening, I care deeply for Karen Allen. And I know that the video and, some screenwriters might think that, that was an easy way out to do that kind of exposition. Yeah. But I loved it, like her singing a duo with Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen, and you could just feel how in love they are from the beginning. Yeah. And you see, I think this is one of Karen Allen's best performance. I think this is one of Jeff Bridges' best performance. And, and it starts off with the Voyager, and, Carl, you remember when Carl Sagan was like on Johnny Carson, and he talked about the Voyager and what it is. It's kind of like sending a a postcard out. And this movie is like, well, what if somebody answered that postcard? What if they show up? And it's kind of funny because the guy's like, we send out this, like, we mean you no harm. We come in peace. And he's like, okay, I'll come check out Earth. And we shoot him down as soon as he gets in the atmosphere. We shoot him down, and he has to send an emergency transmission. He's like, oh, Earth's hostile. Back off. I'll get to Arizona and get me out of here. But you see right away, and I also think that this is about performance as well. I think you get a heavyweight like Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen, and they do beautiful work in this movie. Yeah. Jeff Bridges, I think, and people are going to be like, what are you talking about with Jeff Bridges? This is, I think, one of his best performances. It is so hard as an actor to take everything that's Jeff Bridges and extract it out of yourself and be a hollow vessel and learn how to be a human being in real time. If you had a lesser actor, that could have been so silly and so hack. And Jeff Bridges, you care about him and you watch him grow. And the thing about film is it's not shot in sequence. They didn't shoot this film in sequence. So he had to keep track of every scene of where he is as evolving into a fully formed human being, all the way from the way he talked, all the way from the way he walked. He had to keep track of all the lessons that he learned in every scene. And it is mind-blowing from an actor's point of view to like know what goes into it.
So I'm curious, we talk a lot about writing, which is sort of what I do. You mentioned the acting and how tricky that is. And I would like to hear from an actor. If we ever get one on the show, we could ask him. But
we should have more actors on the show.
Yeah, we should have an actor come on the show. I would like to hear from an actor how you would, we'll talk of functionally how you would do something to tell a certain kind of story. As an actor, what functionally are you doing to do that kind of transition? As you said, you don't shoot it in order. So you're going to be shooting scenes where he's more or less human based on the progression through the story, but not based on the scene you just shot, right? Because you could have shot a completely other scene. As an actor, how would you do that? Do you make notes in your script like I'm 10% human here, I'm 20% here, and so now you have a sort of a timeline? Is that how you do it?
So one of the things that the performance is honest behavior, truthful behavior with imagined circumstances. And so if somebody like a George Clooney, for the most part, he's bringing George Clooney with him to the role. Right. So he looks at the situation, he looks at the script. What is the script trying to say? And how are they using my character to service the thing that they're trying to say? How do I serve that thing? Right. And then you break that down into smaller groups is like, what do I want in this scene? And what is in my way? And great writers understand that too. And they write that. They write what you want in the scene and what your obstacle is. And you pick that up. And so then you break it down on a basic level. You're just fighting for this thing. And you can fight for it as honestly and truthfully as you can, because who you are is in the script. It's a part of the character. Now, there's performances like this, or like performances what Daniel Day-Lewis do, where on top of that basic script analysis, they shape and mold themselves to be a completely different. They extract all of their identity out of themselves. And one of the things about acting is you learn very quickly how malleable identity is. And people say, I just know myself. This is who I am. This is, and you look at it and you're like, it's bullshit. You might have grown up in the same place and been around the same friends. And a lot of our behavior is motivated on whose approval we want.
Yeah.
If you're playing a role, one of the most effective questions to ask is, who do I want to like me? Who do I want in this scene to like me? And then you can start to model your behavior because subconsciously, no matter who you are, we want to be liked by somebody. We want to be liked by a group, some people or whatever, and that plays into who we are. And so if you start pulling those levers, you can change your identity. And if you live in it long enough, that starts to be, the grooves in your brain get made, and that starts to become who you are in certain ways. Like, for instance, when I played Amos for 7 years. When I did this movie immediately after it, it took me a second to have my natural rhythm, my natural sense of humor, the natural way I listen and everything like that. It took me because I was doing this thing for 7 years, and it starts to get in your brain. It starts to get in how you perform. All that is to say, what is so hard that Jeff Bridges did is that if I'm doing a scene with you, Ty, right now, and you say something that makes me laugh, I don't have to think about how I'm going to laugh. I don't have to think about, I just laugh and just react because I'm using this, who I am and do this. Now, if I'm playing somebody that was born and raised in completely different circumstances, has a completely different point of view, different way of looking at the world, different way of speaking, and might have to reflect that, then that's going to take a lot of mind power until that becomes habit. And once that becomes mind power, then you start becoming stiff and mechanical, and you're thinking about the words and you're indicating, and it takes you out of it. So something like this, Jeff Bridges is taking every ounce of dirt. You can't see any of Jeff Bridges in this film. It is gone. And not only that, he is evolving from a child, bird-like creature that is that the human body is foreign to, into a fully formed human being. And that fully formed human being has nothing to do with Jeff Bridges. And this fully formed human being is 100,000 years subconsciously developed over our conscious mind. So he has to have that power of presence and kindness. And that's what's so very impressive about Jeff Bridges' performance. Did I answer your question? Because what were you...
No, I think you that's really interesting stuff. I think that's all sort of the acting theory and stuff. I was thinking like functional, like that was interesting, and I'm glad that you explained all that.
Yeah,
how do you put that on the page?
So I forgot. I was kind of giving the overview of what I think Jeff Bridges is doing, and Jeff Bridges also studied. And there's Alexander technique, there's study of movement, there's dance, there's things that you could take, because if your movement is different, you start to work and develop. Like Jeff Bridges studied birds, he studied children. He said he had this guy named Russell, who was a good friend of his, who was a dancer, and the way that he held himself, and he moved differently than anybody. So he studied Russell. So he really had the movement. But how you keep track of it is, you lay out the script, you do the evolution of the script, and everybody has different things. You can make note cards, or you do, I think Jeff Bridges, because John Carpenter tells a story about looking at Jeff Bridges' script, and he had a picture of a bird on the front of his script. So Jeff Bridges probably makes notes within his scene and saying, this is the scene, this is what I've learned so far, and this hasn't happened this. So this is where I would be behaviorally. So if you're shooting, he's in the car, right? So you're like, okay, we're using this highway for all of these scenes, and we have to shoot this highway scene before the house that we shoot.
Right.
When you start to evolve. So he's got to say, okay, it's today, day one we're shooting, we're doing all the car stuff first. So in all the car stuff, I have to use the imagination of like, how did I evolve? How do I learn? How did I get to this point? And then we shoot all the car stuff too, and then he's got to kind of regress that till he gets back to the house, and this is where I start from. So it's incredibly tricky if you're not using your natural rhythm, your natural personality, your natural voice.
And that was exactly the question I asked. So I'm glad you said all that stuff. Like, I mean, obviously I've worked around actors a lot and had some conversations about process and seen the notes people write in their scripts and that sort of thing. But the sort of deep dive in the mechanics of how you put a performance together, because every, like anything, it's art and science at the same time, right? So there's the art to being an actor, but there's also sort of the mechanics of it. Like, what are you mechanically doing so that you can present that art? and that sort of stuff about how you're going to make notes in your script. Like, I've learned these things, but I haven't learned this yet. So that you can track your evolution through the script when you're shooting it out of order. That's really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not something I've ever had to do. So, yeah.
Well, it's like if you think about The Big Lebowski, which, is one of my favorite Jeff Bridges part, but there is The Big Lebowski's in Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
If you see interviews and stuff like that, he has part of that. So he just puts that exaggerated version of that part of his personality in those imagined circumstances. And he's so creative and powerfully imagining that it could be real, but that personality trait within him is what's fighting for the things that the Big Lebowski is fighting for in the scene.
Yeah.
And every protagonist and every character is always active. Even if they're passive because it's an active reason that they're being passive. And if it's not, it's shit. Nobody enjoys passivity from a performer. But what he does in this, it's interesting about Jeff Bridges, because if you can go on YouTube and watch like old interviews of him during this time. Like, I remember seeing an interview. He was nominated for an Oscar for this, by the way. But I saw an interview with him behind the scenes on this, and the way that he's so articulate and he's so thoughtful, and there's the rhythm and the way he talks, and he's so intelligent. And then if you watch interviews now after The Big Lebowski, it's like something about The Big Lebowski has stuck, and he is the dude. He is the dude. It is stuck somewhere in his psyche, and you hear him talk now, and you're like, wait a minute, where'd the other Jeff Bridges go?
I honestly think they're both the same guy. I think the difference is what we see now is comfortable Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
He's not putting on any front. I think he's just not worried about impressing people anymore.
Yeah.
I think as a younger guy and as a younger actor, before he had the enormous success, I mean, he's had one of the most successful careers ever.
Yeah.
At this point. Early on, you're still trying to impress people a little bit. You're still trying to present you're presenting the most articulate version of yourself, the most thoughtful version of yourself. Yeah. You're presenting that. At this point, he's Jeff fucking Bridges. He can he could be doing interviews for a movie that just came out. He could be rolling a spliff right in the interview and just lighten up, and nobody will give a fuck because he's Jeff fucking Bridges. Yeah.
That's the big danger of me doing this. It's like, now everybody knows I'm a dumbass, whereas before I could have hid that shit. I'm a good enough performer that they never would have known to the thing. And it's like, do I want to expose this now? Yeah, so
but you're skipping that part. You're just going straight to the comfortable part.
Exactly. But what's interesting, and I don't want to stray too far from Starman, but what's interesting is, like, if I get together with my friends that I was in high school with, you quickly on a subconscious level orient yourself to that group dynamic.
I would say revert. You revert to the idiot you were in high school.
Or revert. But that sense of, that collective sense of humor, the way that you talk, the way that, and then I look at because I keep track of all of my friends, and then I look at my military friends, and you immediately revert to that moment in time, and you kind of become, and then I look at my college, and I look at my, early acting days and now. And so I think that giving me acting and this work that we do, the work of storytelling, I think has opened my eyes to identity and to what, who we think we are, who our identity is, what status is really, and how easy things can be tweaked to change who you are, who you come across as. And
well, that's gonna help you in your writing. If you keep writing, that's gonna help you, because one of the things as a writer you have to be very aware of is everybody is two people. They're three people, actually. They're the person that they are. They're the person they would like you to think they are, and they are the person that you think they are. And so when you're writing a scene, you got to keep track of all of that, right? You got to keep track of, this person is this, but they want her to think they're this other thing. But she doesn't think they're that other thing. She thinks they're this third thing. And that has to be apparent in the writing, right? That analysis you just did is incredibly useful for writers. Mm-hmm. That keeping track of that, and keeping mental track of that, because in every scene you should be thinking about that. You should be thinking, this guy, because you were talking about status and how you want other people to perceive you, and you're defined by the people you want to like you. And so you're presenting a version of yourself that is kind of you, but also kind of skewed to match with what you think they want. And what they're seeing is who you're trying to present yourself as, filtered through their perceptions of what those kind of people are.
Right.
So it's very messy.
But you talk going back to story. This is a beautiful story, and you know what it's trying to say. And I think at the time, what John Carpenter and the writers were wanted to do, and Michael Douglas when they got together, was this is coming out of the 70s and the 60s, and this was a time where there was a lot of movies that were negative, and rightly so, about a lot of negative things that were happening. And it was saying, let's just take a minute to show the beauty of the country, right? Yeah. And like physical beauty. Let's just take a second, and you're right. It's kind of this weird science fiction road movie love story. But what the story is to me is, as they're going to the destination and Jeff Bridges is learning what it's like to be human and seeing the violence, the love, the passion, the humor, the pleasures of the senses, food, love, making love, he's learning what it means to be human. And he's seeing what humanity is. And he says, he's speaking to Karen Allen in the car, and he says, we don't have violence. We have one language. There's no difference in status. And he says, it's beautiful, but it's not like here. We've lost something. And he says, here, you guys are violent, you're passionate, but you're so alive. And there's something interesting within that. It's like, to be fully alive, you got to embrace all the good and the bad, the yin and the yang. But Charles Martin Smith has a great arc in this too. Yeah, he comes to the realization, he's just fascinated, becomes a realization that it's better to save this guy's life than to control him and study him and use him for that thing.
I'm not sure how much I buy that. I think they would have kept him.
Wait a second. You don't think there's people I bet your wife would save him.
Yeah, but my wife will never wind up in an important position in government because she's not ruthless. She's not ruthless enough.
That's a fair point. But his position, he's a scientist.
Yeah.
He's not, he's playing the same role he played in the Caveman movie. Iceman.
Yeah. I do think there is the other way this movie could go very wrong. The other way that this movie could the big mistake you could make with this story.
I know what you're going to say.
Is not giving the Karen Allen character her journey through how fucking creepy it is to have some dude show up wearing your dead husband's skin and just show up asking you for stuff looking like your dead husband. They let her deal with that. They let her go through that emotional, finding a way to accept that has happened and finding a way to deal with it. If she had started out like, yay, my dead husband is back, that would have been a huge mistake.
Yeah, I think it's genius. Genius. I think it's really smart that her husband just passed away because she's blind with grief.
Yes.
And, I know if I was in a situation and my wife came back, you would want to believe it so hard, even though you'll fight against it. And, she tried to get away. She tried to run away. She was scared. Yep. But you would want to believe so hard that it would defy any rational thought.
Well, no, but I maybe, but I also think her fear is very justified. And I think her fear that felt real to me. Like you needed those moments of her going, what the fuck? Right?
Yeah.
Like my dead husband is now hanging out in my living room. That is not okay. And suspecting something terribly wrong is happening and trying to get away from it. I'm glad that they did that. I think those were really important character moments. And as she comes to understand what he is and comes to have affection for him, it feels much more earned because of the earlier.
Yes, I mean
stuff.
it's a beautiful progression. It's way different than Christine. Like the way that they evolve and the events that happen, how she goes from actively trying to stop him, trying to run away, trying to get away, to then being on board with him and being in cahoots with him, and then ultimately rescuing him at the end. It is well written, it is well acted, it is well performed, and it is beautifully done. I love that they're regular people. I love that he was a painter and she's in the middle of the woods in Wisconsin, because it tells the story that love is beautiful. It's not like he landed in Buckingham Palace, usually like somebody that's really important or whatever. It's like, no, this is like just people that are working to provide, living their lives, and they have a love for each other that's, worthy of a prince and princess. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. You don't want to think about the ending too hard, because it starts to seem kind of fucked up. That this guy shows up, embodies her dead husband, who she is dealing with massive grief over, has her drive him through the country and fall in love with him, and then leaves her so she has to deal with the grief of losing her husband a second time, and he knocks her up. So now she's like, he's like a deadbeat dad who knocks her up, ditches her, and now she has to re-grieve her husband. Like, the things that happen after he's gone, the things that the movie doesn't show, there's some fucked up stuff happening there. There's some emotional shit.
I see it different. What I see is the greatest regret in her life is that she didn't have a child with her one true love. She didn't have something left behind that she can always have a piece of him going forward. Now that he's gone, he's gone. And so the Starman shows up, and he is genetically, in his DNA, is this guy.
Yes.
And so what he's saying is, he acknowledges the fact, I know I'm leaving you again, and I know you're going through this again, but I gave you the thing that you always wanted, and you will always have a piece of me and your original true love with you for the rest of your life. And that, to me...
I know it is played as beautiful, that it is played as romantic. I get it. But there is something kind of fucked up about it.
So in Ty's movie, you'd be like, wait a minute, you fucking knocked me up without asking me first.
Without asking
those little
me.
balls, without fucking asking me.
Yeah.
And now you're leaving me? Who's going to take care of these fucking kids?
Exactly.
But guess what? Those kids have the alien magic power. He gives them a ball, and the kid's going to know how to use that marble. So she's going to be okay. She's going to be all right.
Do you remember they made one season of a TV show?
Yeah.
Where the dad comes back looking for the son, right?
I haven't seen it. I didn't, but I remember that. I remember the time when the show. Well, how was it? Did you see it?
I only saw a couple episodes of it. It wasn't very good.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be good. A movie like this, it's about the journey. It's about the road trip. It's about them falling in love. And once they get to that point, once they're in love and once they finish the trip, there's no more story. And so when there's stories like this, like, when you do a TV show, there's something that's endlessly mineable. Yeah. Like there's, like Game of Thrones, like eventually when they get to the throne or whatever at the end, it's over. And so, sometimes I'm like, that was a popular thing. Let's make this again. It's like, well, the story's over. The story was told,
I think that's the best way to leave somebody you've just knocked up. Like, our story is over. I have to go now. Our story is over. I have to go.
But she is now, she has a piece of her one true love for the
I understand.
rest of her life. And
I
it has
understand.
alien superpowers. Like, do you
I understand that they're playing that as very romantic, but
hey,
I think it would have been appropriate to at least ask her first.
Hey, what if Starman came back?
Do you want to be knocked up with your dead husband kid that whose skin I'm wearing now?
She did actually. To be fair, she does tell him that was one of her biggest regrets, is that she never had a son with the one with the one true love. Now, can I say something like?
I still think you should ask permission.
What if Starman comes back and Karen Allen's like drunk with power and her son is like the president of the world and he's like uses that little marble for like world domination and he's like, whoa, I misjudged you, and then she's like, she doesn't, she tries to shoot him out of the sky.
I mean, that's interesting. I'd watch that show.
Yeah, I'd watch that movie. Then it becomes V. That she's the V. Didn't they try to remake? Yeah, they did remake V.
They did remake V.
Yeah.
I don't think it lasted very long, but yeah.
Dear patron members, I enjoy our time together. You made me a better man and a greater spiritual leader. Ty thanks you as well. And if you get a chance, please like and subscribe. Do all the things that support us so we can reach more people. Our goal is to get up to 15 followers by 2024.
I mean, it's a lofty goal. It's going to be difficult to reach.
We're going to have, you know when the church wants to build a new wing on its church and they have the pyramid where you color in with a marker? So right now we're at a solid 8. Our goal before 2024 is to get 15 followers. I
mean, that's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough, but I believe we can do it.
And if we do, then we will be able to build a wing on Joseph's house for his children to live in so they don't have to sleep outside anymore. And by wing, I mean a cardboard lean-to against his trailer. But it's still going to be a relatively dry, warm place for Joseph's young girls to sleep in so they don't have to sleep outside.
And it'll be treated cardboard.
Yeah,
so
it'll be good cardboard.
Good. Yeah.
It'll be high
treated.
Quality.
It'll be waterproof, high quality, structurally. Yeah. We'll throw in some 2x4s to give it support.
We could put a space heater in there for him.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be nice. It'll be really nice. Yeah. So Joseph's kids living indoors by 2024. That's the goal. Help us get there.
That's the goal. 2024. I picture like I just see cut to like Joseph kids like they have those mittens without the fingers.
Yeah.
And they're like over the fire and they have a can of beans that
the little tin coffee cup.
Yeah,
they're heating water over. Yeah,
right.
With like pine needles in it.
And Pa shows up. Joseph shows up with a possum. Did you get a possum, Pa?
How many teeth do I have in this? By the way.
By 2024, probably none.
Yeah. By 2024.
Yeah. Possums are good eating. So
they are good eating. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.